joining me now in the studio here in Auckland. What a rare treat for the Midweek Mediawatch. It's Colin Peacock. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very well.
It is a treat to be in Auckland. Everything's bigger.
Everything is bigger.
When I go back to Wellington, it'd be like when you go back to your old primary
That's
school.
true.
Everything seems teeny tiny.
Yeah. I thought about bringing the jacket. I have a jacket, a light color, cream coloured jacket that Colin tried to steal last time I was in Wellington. Because do you know this?
I don't remember trying to steal any of your clothes. I do remember you were luxuriantly outfitted.
Yeah.
I remember thinking I could never carry off something like that.
No, you tried it on.
I'd never be able to keep it clean.
You were swimming in it a wee bit. Yeah, it's not a very practical item of clothing. Yeah.
I don't remember wearing your clothes. I'm sorry about that. Was it a bit too...
No, not at all. I was quite flattered, actually. It was nice. What are you doing here in Auckland, first of all?
Oh, well, I've been up. The AUT have had a couple of interesting events, part of their Technology in Society series. But mainly there's a visiting guest from the BBC who is their head of technology forecasting. So an AI expert, and her name is Laura Ellis, and she comes from out of a news background, so hard years and hard news.
Oh, wow.
And now, so she's got a bit of quite a practical lens on what it might and might not do, because a lot of the talk about AI, it's so abstract, isn't it? You know, when you look at it and think, well, what will this really change, and how will it change the media? So she was very interesting, and she was giving a talk tonight with the title, "Will AI Save Us?"
And some very some excellent job future-proofing from her, it's fair to say as well.
Well, from her point of view, yeah, she's done well to find a job for that. But, there's this thing of like, will AI kill your job, or will your job then be taken, if not, maybe your job will be taken by someone who understands AI better than you do.
Maybe.
So, there's a bit of that going on. And I've interviewed her, and that'll be available to hear in the weekend.
Oh, cool.
On Mediawatch on RNZ National.
There you go.
After the 9 o'clock news on
After
Sunday
9
morning
o'clock
with Jim
news
Moore.
on Sunday morning with Jim Moore.
Again, after the 10 p.m. news, available as a podcast.
He satisfied his contractual obligations.
That's right. If symptoms persist, see your doctor. Yeah,
all right, let's talk media, and we'll begin with on last week's Midweek Media Watch, Hayden led with NZME's ongoing bitter boardroom battle.
As we often do, yeah.
But soon after that, it was, is it all over?
Kind of. The shareholders still have to vote for this when they meet on June the 3rd, but they've agreed to kind of compromise. So this was on Friday that this emerged. So a new board will be elected. It will include James Grennan, who is the Canadian billionaire or close to expat, the activist shareholder, let's call him that, who really wanted the chairmanship himself. Stephen Joyce, former National MP and Government Minister, is the choice of chair that both the existing management and the ones that want to change have agreed to. Other directors selected by or chosen by James Grennan won't actually get on the main board, but they're going to have a board to run the One Roof operation, the property news thing, which is quite lucrative.
Which is the moneymaker, right?
It is.
Yeah.
And also an editorial board, which is something that James Grennan and his allies wanted. And so the new activist shareholders, let's call them that, will have a presence on that.
So it's a draw?
It is, pretty much, I think so. So long as we said there, the shareholders assent to it. And actually at this point, can I just point out a quick clarification that we have to do, because on Midweek Media Watch last week, Hayden misspoke to you slightly. So
stop it.
Yeah, afraid
Hayden
so.
Donnell misspoke.
He misspoke.
I've seen it all now.
You don't see what I stopped getting through on it. No, just kidding. No, he did. It was quite fleeting, but when he was talking about this with you, he mentioned that thing about one of the conditions, one of the things that both parties now agree to is this elevation of the NZME content editor-in-chief, basically figure, the chief content officer, will be at executive level of the company. This used to be the case 2 or 3 years ago, and they want to restore this. So this is now going to happen. The person who holds that job is Murray Kirkness, who is also the overall editor of the Herald. So yes, he will be at that executive level as a result of that change. But Hayden had sort of mentioned that the post itself did not have that, was kind of demoted from that status, and mentioned Murray's name in connection with that. But Murray Kirkness, to be clear, was never actually demoted or relegated from anything. A couple of years he didn't hold that post. The job title wasn't quite the same,
right.
Although it is being elevated in this. So yes, we apologise to Murray. We got that wrong. And at the AUT tonight, I was sitting next to Murray Kirkness. So we've chatted about that. So I've been able to personally convey the extent of this clarification to him.
And now publicly as well. All right, so the boardroom war is over, but the war of words continues.
Yeah, I mean, as Hayden was saying, this is the theme of it. It's been these statements to the NZX and to each party coming out. No real interviews, or very few taking place, or there have been a couple. But the former Herald editor, Tim Murphy, went on X and said when this compromise was announced or became clear on Friday, he reckoned it was a kind of a retreat by the Grennan camp. He said the rightward raider, Jim Grennan, has come up short in the final board wash-up. He won't get his chairmanship that he wanted. He only gets one sole director, which is him, not five. 3 out of 5 of the old board will stay, and they get their choice as chair, Stephen Joyce. Now, Philip Crump, one of the allies of James Grennan, who was one of Grennan's picks to be on the new board, he replied, this is a number of errors, astonishing number of errors from a senior journo, Tim Murphy here. Said it's actually 4 directors, not 5. They got 1 seat on the main board for James Grennan, 2 on the sub-boards for One Roof for the editorial board. 3 out of 5 of the executive directors remain, but one's already left, so effectively there's only 2 of the existing 5. And they get their editor-in-chief back on the executive, as we were just saying, the editorial board they wanted. And they say that James Grennan spoke to Stephen Joyce in December about all this, and it's very much a shared victory. He says that he is now likely to be the chair, and he also says Tim Murphy was wrong to describe James Grennan as rightward. He should have described him as right wing. So quite picky. It's just a turn of phrase in a tweet, but
right,
quite an intense focus.
Rigorous.
There, I'd say.
The sort of rigour perhaps that Philip Crump will bring to bear on the new NZME editorial board.
Maybe. That remains to be seen. But he posted on Substack, Philip Crump, a few days back, 6 key issues that I believe are eroding public confidence in journalism. And we tried to interview him about the project at NZME. He declined to be interviewed on Mediawatch weekend before last. But anyway, he has now listed what he says are the 6 key issues that he thinks are doing journalism down.
All right. Shall we run through them briefly?
We could, but we would eat up probably the entire program. Shall I rip through?
Yeah, rip through them.
Or rip through the. Okay. Number 1, emphasising narrative over factual reporting. Journalists increasingly favour identifying the truth, but often select a preferred narrative which they consider to be the truth. Number 2, abandoning balance for editorial advocacy. When journalists choose the truth, the first thing that's sacrificed is balance. Many now regard balance with scepticism. So he goes on to say 3, shaping the discourse through editorial gatekeeping. Editorial decisions cover or ignore stories often reflect the biases or agendas of individual journalists. This has the effect of steering the public discourse to favour specific narratives, he says. Number 4, prioritising sensationalism to chase engagement, so so-called clickbait. Number 5, manipulating perceptions with loaded language. Journalists use loaded descriptors. And the example he gives here is a politician can be described as embattled, but these kind of labels are abuses that reveal the biases of journalists deploying them rather than enlightening the reader. Cheap shots that erode the value of the masthead, he says. And finally, reinforcing narratives with selective experts and anonymous sources, selectively chosen experts with questionable credentials or undisclosed affiliations while sidelining dissenting expertise.
Right. Well, without asking you to go through all of these point by point, what do you make broadly of these 6?
Well, I mean, these are things that are talked about in newsrooms, and editors make decisions about them all the time. So I don't think it's especially new. For example, the sensationalism to chase engagement. Well, what he says here is just completely true. It's an analysis of what goes on. Digital algorithms, newsrooms are now reliant on them. Journalists are under pressure to produce content that might maximise clicks. But is the new NZME going to insulate the Herald and their journalists and ZB from that? Because premium paying subscribers, who they really have got to hold on to, do they really want the news range kind of opened up for this open-mindedness he's calling for from a wider range of so-called experts and so on? And as for this manipulating perceptions with loaded language, I'm sure that can happen. But that example there, embattled, a politician embattled, that strikes me as not. I mean, the readers understand there's a shorthand here. This is a politician that's
right
at the centre of a controversy.
You feel as though
facing criticism. It just seems to me like these are things that will be discussed and talked about quite a bit. And I don't know if quite what difference it'll make if you have an editorial board discussing them or how it might rewrite actual practical policy that would have an impact on the news output.
So, all in all, you seem to be suggesting that this is sort of a talking the talk kind of situation, but Philip Crump now perhaps is in a position to walk the walk with this role on this editorial board. So.
Yeah, but it depends, I guess, how the editorial board operates,
right, yeah.
Who goes along with it, how its recommendations are put into practice, so we'll have to see. But, I mean, some of this is stuff that editors already deal with. It will be covered in their existing editorial principles and guidelines. And it reads to me, I might be misreading this, and again, I think Philip Crump may wish to talk to a program such as ours after the vote in early June, NZME shareholders meet. But it feels to me a little bit like sort of quite old school US style newspaper editorial standards, where they're quite neutral, and your British papers were all partisan and had a lot of opinion and often a political leading and endorsed things, and US papers were very much straight down the line and quite rigorously, subbed and scrutinised, and sometimes the language neutralised a bit. So we'll see what it really means, but it just reads a little like that to me. And
there's nothing wrong with that, though. Right?
No, there isn't. But it's also a little hard to square with Philip Crump's ZB Plus operation, where he was saying nothing will be off limits. We'll publish the stuff the mainstream media is scared of, and in the end, it ended up serving up opinion from people that were already on NZME's publications, like Fran O'Sullivan, for example, Bruce Cotterill. Who now does a podcast business kind of pundit, and then other outside pundits who are already publishing their own stuff on their own blogs. It didn't kind of work. I mean, I know they have been at pains to point out they're not trying to recreate ZB Plus or the other website that we've talked about, The Centrist, which he had a hand in backing. But to me, I can't quite see how, running through creating these lists. I think he's published another one today, 6 Golden Rules for Restoring Trust.
A sequel.
Yeah, which I haven't had a good look at. But look, it would be good if he does, come on and talk about it when he feels free to do so after that vote, because quite how an editorial board would work like this and how it would impact the journalism at the Herald and News Talk ZB and NZME, it'd be very interesting.
I would really enjoy a discussion between you two. I find Philip Crump's writing really thought-provoking. I don't always necessarily personally agree, insofar as it sort of matters, but I do always find it really thought-provoking.
Oh, he's definitely thoughtful and very precise in his own use of language in these 6 points. But it is frustrating that he has said, we encourage people to engage with our vision for NZME, and then, feels he cannot come on and do an interview about it. But maybe he will in the
hopefully.
future.
All right, let's talk about, one of the big stories of today, C-Bomb Gate. There has been a very strong reaction to this, something that might not make it past the strict editorial board.
Yes, it did. Although it did its stuff, it was considered and decided to be appropriate.
So let's take people through this, people who might not be familiar, although it would be hard to not be familiar with the story at this point in time. So what did Andrea Vance actually say here? Right,
so this was a column in the Sunday Star Times, her weekly column. It was headlined, "Girl Math Budget Will Cut Deep for Women." And so she said, "It's a curious feminist movement, isn't it?" I'm quoting now. Moment, a curious feminist moment. 6 girl bosses, Willis, her hype squad, Judith Collins, Erica Stanford, Louise Upston, Nicola Grigg, and Brooke Van Velden, all united in a historic act of economic backhanding of other women. A phalanx of female MPs. Now, this is interesting. A generously paid, traditionally overvalued trade, shafting the underpaid women doing vital feminised labour that keeps the country functioning. So this obviously all about the pay equity legislation, rushed to under urgency, and the way that was presented, with Nicola Willis fronting it with her female cabinet colleagues in a supportive position beside her. So that is what Andrea Vance is writing about. Then she says, "So turns out you can have it all," says Andrea Vance, "so long as you're prepared to be RC ... to the women who birth your kids, school your offspring, and wipe the arse of your elderly parents while you enjoy your 6-figure pay packet." So that is it. Now, I mean, interesting. This went out, published in the paper, appeared online on the Sunday. It was raised at the post-cabinet press conference. The Prime Minister was asked questions about it. It didn't seem to have the heat that it now does. But it came up in Parliament today. And Brooke Van Velden, initially reluctant to address this, but she was kind of forced to by parliamentary questions. And in the end, she said this.
"And I do not agree with the clearly gendered and patronising language that Andrea Vance used to reduce senior cabinet ministers to girl bosses, hype squads, references to girl math and That's right. The women of this government are hard-working, dedicated and strong.
Which was, oh my goodness.
Yes.
Was not expecting that.
No, and I don't think anyone had quite heard that in Parliament before, but she didn't want to go that far into it. She initially was asked for a reaction to the article by, I think, Jan Tinetti, Labour opposition, and then supplementary questions kind of forced her into addressing it. That's when that came out. But she's had support from the government for doing this, for hitting back at it. And look, we did ask Andrea Vance to speak to her, but this has been, I think all media have kind of been referred to staff management who've said that, this was a robust comment, but they did think about it. They decided it was appropriate in the end. One thing that's in my mind is that Andrea Vance did write, I think last month, maybe a few weeks prior to that, not long ago anyway, about MPs and Parliament failing to act meaningfully on all the abuse of women in politics. And she pointed out female journalists get a lot of this too. We have the Harmful Digital Communications Act, but it's not used very effectively, she said. I just wonder whether some of this was all on her mind and she was somehow folding this thing of abuse of women and kind of trying to own it somehow by, using that quite extreme language, and persuaded her editor, Tracy Watkins at the Star Times, that this was a kind of bold call worth making.
What has Stuff actually had to say about this?
Well, they just said, I don't have the exact words in front of me, but that we thought about it. We thought it was a robust response to a topical column. Said that they respect the journalists who know what they're doing, Tracy Watkins and Andrea Vance. And they thought in that spirit, in the context, it was okay to publish this. And this did remind me, the last time they published that word was in response that was abuse that was directed at, I think, former Porirua Mayor Anita Baker.
Right, yeah.
And they published some of the stuff that she was getting, I think, in the paper they used the full word, online they didn't. And Anna Fifield, the editor of The Post at the time, which published this, wrote in a front page piece saying, "You're probably shocked that we published that C word there. Well, let me tell you why we did it. Can you imagine what it's like to get that in your inbox, get that word, that abuse?" And so she was painting a picture like that. And yet, in this instance, I mean, that's kind of what's happened to
but that's a quote.
The female politicians. They've picked up their paper and seen the Sunday Star Times calling them that.
And is there a difference in your mind between quoting something that somebody else has said and a columnist choosing to use a word for which there are alternatives?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it's right there, the old Broadcasting Standards Authority list of
it's right
not
top,
to swear.
Right?
It's
number three.
Number two, I think.
Number two, right.
But those are currently up for review. But I don't think it's going to go too far down the charts. It's a very offensive word. They know it. There are alternatives. There's other ways of saying that too. And, for someone who just made the point, it can't be a coincidence that she'd just been making the point about MPs hand-wringing and not doing enough to act about, so putting out another report about the abuse that women get in and around politics, that she was over it. This is clearly something that's on her mind and she wanted to express it in this way.
Yeah.
But not everyone would have got that context, or even if they did, they probably still wouldn't see it as acceptable, because it is, there's the other terms there, girl boss, girl math, stuff that some people might understand the way those terms are being deployed or how other people might use them. I think some people just be scratching their heads, and it looked like an attempt to belittle them. I mean, Judith Collins, for example, also reacted. This is one of the most repulsive articles I've seen in my time in politics. Appalling personal attack, she said. I mean, it's interesting coming from an ally of whale oil back in the day. She'd seen a part of that, that aggressive form of verbal attacks on people, if not that particular word. So, I think it makes it difficult for the paper, because we also had Nicola Willis today. I heard her in the 5 p.m. bulletin talking to reporters saying, Chris Hipkins, if he doesn't condemn, she's making it political, but he doesn't condemn what was said in the paper about our women politicians. Can we ever take him seriously if he ever complains about abuse directed at his members? And I think the Stuff now finds themselves in that position too. Will people take them seriously if they complain because, they allowed and decided to publish, this particular word?
We've been talking about this tonight. I've had many texts in on it, many thoughtful and interesting texts. And I got an email from William Walker. This is on Andrea Vance's side of the argument. William writes, I'm a 66-year-old man. I observed my mother left to fend for 4 children alone on basic pay after a divorce gave the family home to Dad purely because he was a man. My 3 sisters had to work longer hours than men to earn their keep. And for over 60 years, I've observed 2 or 3 generations of women strive to achieve equal pay for their gender, something which did not flow immediately or naturally from the Equal Pay Act. I felt elation that many women felt when the last Labour government, with the support of many in opposition, passed legislation that gave women a real means by which they could achieve their goal of being valued the same as men monetarily, and I felt stunned and affronted when the government turned back the clock in such a swift and crude manner last week. Andrea Vance didn't actually use the C word in her article, but I have never seen anyone use the C word so appropriately and artfully as she did. It was a terrific piece of writing. I suppose the subtext to that, and a sentiment that I've seen coming through quite a lot in the texts today, is extraordinary decisions sometimes call for extraordinary language, and if you are, as the media claims to be, the critic and conscience of society, then perhaps sometimes you have to take extreme steps like that.
Well, okay, and following that on, I guess you could say you need someone with a license then to, be a bit descriptive and, personally author something. I mean, for example, she does write with a pretty acidic turn of phrase. I mean, recently, just for example, I remember being taken aback during the reports of the diplomatic problems New Zealand was having around the Pacific. She, I think, described Kiribati as an impoverished and sinking country. And I was like, oh, just in passing. And that really wasn't the point of the article. Well, that may be offensive to some people, but she's kind of making a point. She's not dressing it up. So maybe, but to choose such an abusive word and for it not to be entirely clear, quite why she needed to go that far. And, she's a national affairs correspondent for Stuff. So if you're dealing with national affairs, you're weighing things up, big issues of state and the nation, it still seems surprising to me. This is the Stuff statement. In fact, it's not the first time our editors have allowed the use of it. Carefully reviewed by experienced editors on this occasion, it was decided it was acceptable usage in this context. So though they don't say so, I think they're thinking the issue was so strong, the reaction so intense for so many people, and that it was so sudden that it seemed like a betrayal, that if she felt it personally, if she's writing a personal column, they decided to go there.
Well, the piece has certainly gone far and wide now.
Yeah, I mean, Heather Duplessis-Allen noted that she thought it had backfired. This is on News Talk ZB, because Stuff allowed Nicola Willis to write a rebuttal saying,
piece,
didn't expect that on Mother's Day, that I was going to get the C word chucked at me by a national media organisation, but let's look at the issues. And Heather Duplessis-Allen's point was, so now Stuff have had to give her a platform to actually argue, well, this is why we did it in the way we did it. So suddenly this is what's at stake here, and that they had somehow lost Stuff by having to allow Willis to explain her case. I'm not sure Stuff would really see it like that, but indeed that Nicola Willis rebuttal was right up there on their most read list. So in terms of engagement, if starting a debate, which reminds me of my favourite ever cartoon, which was 2 guys on on crucifixes wearing identical business suits nailed together, and one of them's leaning across to the other one saying, I know what you're saying, Brian, but in the end, surely anything that stimulates debate has got to be good.
All right, let's talk a bit about the social media ban. You looked at this last weekend on Mediawatch, the Prime Minister tentatively pushing for a ban on social media for under 16s, and now they're really backing it seems. Yeah,
it was a members' bill there that didn't have ACT Party backing, might never have made it out of that biscuit tin. But then on Sunday, not long after Mediawatch, although that's a coincidence, he comes out with Erica Stanford, Christopher Luxon, the Prime Minister. And but in the end, the point I was making on Mediawatch was, we already had a process for safer online services under the previous government. Brooke Van Velden, as Internal Affairs Minister, scrapped it. So we could have been moving towards the sort of thing that they need to do. But, they thought that was overreach and a shortcut to hate speech and so on, so that was gone. But we could have been, if the idea is now to be fast followers of what works overseas, we could have been on our way to that already with, updated media regulation that was 4 years in the making.
Two different things, though, right? Targeting specific problems with a specific law and then creating one big regulator or monitor of the media.
Yes, absolutely. That is true. But still, I think a bit of a missed opportunity, because what they're now saying is, we need to cut off social media for teens, threaten penalties, for platforms that fail to observe this and cut the under 16s out. There's all sorts of holes in it. People on family WhatsApp groups, just because they're under 16, can they not mention? I mean, what if under 16s want to join community organisations that are on Facebook, and that's the only way to join a group? So lots to work out here. I thought actually, in the same edition of the Star Times that had that Andrea Vance column, Tracy Watkins said, look, the government could have tackled the toxic algorithms and that spread hate and division. All they've done is hand-wring for all these years. They could have acted against the troll factories that encourage violence. They could have demanded social media giants be good citizens, pay proper taxes, but they found excuses not to act. They could have required, these are her words, social media to abide by the same ethical, professional and legal codes as traditional media, but did nothing. So I think that is a fair point to make. And got a bit of audio for you now, because David Parker did a kind of exit interview on 9 to Noon.
Yeah.
And Catherine Ryan raised it with him, and he was talking tough on it on the way out, like this.
We need to give them, say, a couple of years' notice. We're going to legislate now to remove their exclusion of liability in 2 years' time. Say, we'll work with you on safe harbours in the meantime. We need to invest in a safe social media platform so that they can't bluff us, because in the end, those countries could move to something that is a decent platform rather than be held hostage by those that are, selfish, greedy and wrong.
Which is pretty strong rhetoric.
It is, but, he was in power. They could have done something about it. But he's right there about the opportunism when he says, they've had safe harbour online companies, from copyright, prosecution, all that, and built up their big capacity and power. But, interesting to hear a cabinet minister, a thoughtful one, outline the problems, but he was in Parliament for a long time and nothing was done.
A couple of minutes left to chat very quickly at the end about RNZ, which has come under fire on Mother's Day, Colin.
Yeah, it was. This was the Sunday morning program. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but a listener got in touch to say that the Sunday Morning with Jim Mora had marked Mother's Day with a male scientist, an interview with him, about a super mum that turned out to be a cow getting inducted into an agricultural hall of fame. One of the best mums in the business had 111 offspring and transmitted her super genetics. And she says, the complainant, there was no mention of any human female in the rest of the program on the website, but that actually wasn't quite right, because they had the author Anne Applebaum from the UK and New York-based Devonport-raised musician Indy Yelich on the show, and also Bridget Tunnicliffe of RNZ was in Mediawatch, which was part of Sunday Morning talking about broadcasting.
I thoroughly enjoyed that, actually. And RNZ more broadly is there's the gender balance on some programs has been raised. Yeah,
well, one in particular, that's 30 with Guy and the Guy and Espiner program, where he sits down for half an hour and has a big long chat with someone. Katie Harris, filling in as the Herald's media insider, said, they'd only had, I think, 5 out of 25 guests have been women, only 1 in the current season. RNZ said we can't always get the mix we want because of scheduling, etc. She said, I think that's just not diverse enough in this day and age. It seems she wasn't convinced by that, but prompted me to look at the Leighton Smith podcast on NZME, which I think went for the best part of 12 months when I looked, without having any women on it, apart from a couple of replays in their Christmas season. So that's possibly New Zealand's most gender lopsided show.
Colin Peacock, lovely to have you in. Thank you.
It's been fun. Great to be in Auckland for a change.